The film begins in a desert in Somalia, where we see a teenage girl named Waris Deary playing with some goats. Being a member of a nomadic tribe, she lives in a tent with her Orthodox family and her 11 siblings. Waris, who is very close to her younger siblings, promises them that they will always remain together. Years later, when Waris is in London, she enters a shopping center and is astonished by the modern accessories and outfits. Excited, she begins to try everything on, thus attracting the attention of the staff. When a store employee named Marilyn attempts to call security, Waris panics and runs away. She heads to the bathroom and takes out her passport, which she has kept as if it were a treasure. Marilyn runs into her in the bathroom, is startled to see her, and tries to communicate with her, but Waris is unable to speak because she does not speak English. It turns out that although Waris has been living in London for 6 years, she still has not been able to adjust to the environment and does not have a place to live. Having no one else, she tries to befriend Marilyn, but upon seeing Waris's eccentric behavior, Marilyn tries to avoid her. While Waris runs after Marilyn down a street, Marilyn becomes annoyed and rejects her. Dejected, Waris spends the night wandering London's back alleys in search of a suitable place to sleep. Hungry, she searches through trash to find food scraps to quench her thirst and gain some energy. The next morning, she waits for Marilyn and approaches her on a bus, handing her a letter in which she asks to be allowed to spend a night at the hostel. Marilyn reluctantly agrees and takes her there, emotionally blackmailing the warden to allow Waris to stay for the night. The warden agrees to let her stay for 1 night, which earns Waris's respect. The next morning, Marilyn awakens in her room, astonished to see it so neat and tidy. She realizes that Waris could work as cleaning staff, so she recommends her to a place that always needs workers. Marilyn accompanies her downstairs, and before leaving, gives her a jacket as a gesture of goodwill. Waris goes to the recommended place to start working and finally gets a job in a fast food restaurant where she mops floors and saves hidden leftovers from the food. One day, she is discovered by a fashion photographer named Donaldson Terry. He is amazed when he sees Waris's beautiful features and hands her his business card, offering for her to get in touch since he is always looking for new faces to photograph. Without thinking much, Waris goes to Marilyn that night and manages to register at the hostel with the money she earns from her job. After checking in, Marilyn insists on going out to have fun, but Waris refuses because she wants to fill out a form for English classes. O'Neill, the hostel caretaker, is attracted to Waris and tries to pursue her, but Marilyn stops him. He gives a letter to Marilyn, and she becomes quite sad upon learning that she has once again been rejected by a dance school. Seeing her upset, Waris cheers her up by dressing up and taking her to a nightclub. At the club, Marilyn enjoys dancing, while Waris stays in a corner watching the crowd. Music. Just then, a man named Harold Jackson notices her and is dazzled by Waris's beauty. He approaches her, and they introduce themselves. Waris starts the conversation by asking what his name means, and she also reveals hers, which means desert flower. Harold is impressed by Waris and offers to dance with her. During the dance, he tries to get close to her, but Waris suddenly becomes uncomfortable and runs away. Moments later, she returns to her room at the hostel and finds Marilyn having a good time with a stranger, which shocks her. When Marilyn asks what's wrong, Waris explains that she was circumcised at the age of 3. In her homeland, there is a custom of circumcising women. Waris recalls how an elderly desert woman cut away the parts that could one day allow her to feel carnal pleasure and then sewed her lips shut so her husband could be certain he had married a virgin. Marilyn is stunned by this revelation and asks Waris if she can feel anything. Waris downplays it, saying that is how all women in the world should be. Marilyn bursts into tears upon hearing this and tells her it's a barbaric act, that it's not right, and it's certainly not common in her country. The next day, while Waris continues working in the restaurant, she meets Terry again. He tries to convince her to consider his offer, but Waris does not respond. During lunch, she meets Marilyn in the park and shows her Terry's business card. Marilyn goes crazy upon seeing it and says Terry is a famous fashion photographer. She then gives Waris a note from Harold, who sent it to Waris's address in New York in case she ever wants to visit him. Suddenly, Waris begins experiencing painful cramps, and Marilyn quickly takes her to the hospital. When the doctor sees that her intimate parts are sewn together, he decides to operate on her to free her from the torment she has been suffering. However, since Waris doesn't understand English, he calls a Somali doctor and asks him to explain to Waris in her language that she does not need to worry, as she will be treated as soon as possible. The Somali doctor, instead of translating, reminds Waris about the customs and traditions of their culture, scolding her for allowing herself to be examined by a white doctor. Devastated, Waris leaves the hospital and walks through the London back alleys where Africans live. In a flashback, we see that when Waris began menstruating, her mother arranged her marriage to an older man who already had 3 wives. Waris begged her mother not to force her into the marriage, but the old man had paid a large sum to acquire Waris as his wife. With no other option, Waris decided to run away with her grandmother. While sneaking out at night, her younger brother offered to go with her, but she refused, although she promised to return for him once she had earned enough money. She then walked hundreds of miles across the desert barefoot, surviving by eating plants. On her journey, she saw a truck passing by and climbed onto it. The perverted driver tried to abuse her, but Waris managed to defend herself by hitting him over the head with a stone. After a long, distressing journey, she finally arrived in Mogadishu to meet her grandmother. Her grandmother revealed that Waris's mother also suffered greatly to marry the man she loved, since her family disapproved of him for being a nomad. Back in the present, Waris decides to get the surgery, so she returns to the hospital. After the operation, she meets Terry and asks him how much he will pay her for the photo shoot. Terry laughs at the question and tells her that normally he's the one who asks about costs. When he asks if she is ready to be a model, Waris says she is interested in a better life. Excited, Terry prepares her for the photo shoot. At first, Waris can't stop blinking because of the camera flash, but when Terry distracts her by talking about her family, she poses perfectly. Terry recommends Waris to a modeling agency where they ask her to walk in heels. Seeing how poorly she walks and how marked her feet are, the modeling agent Lucinda polishes her up and also sends her for training. Very soon, Waris rises to the top ranks of modeling. Lucinda gets her assigned to several fashion shows around the world. To arrange this, she takes Waris's passport in order to get the visa. Meanwhile, Marilyn continues struggling to enroll in a ballet school. One day, Waris visits her and gives her an expensive watch as a token of gratitude for being a good friend. Marilyn is surprised to see the costly watch and asks how Waris is making so much money. Waris tells her about her upcoming international shows and asks Marilyn to teach her how to walk in heels. She agrees, and soon we see both of them enjoying their time together as they talk. However, their happiness is short-lived because Lucinda bursts in, furious with Waris for providing an illegal passport. In her anger, she threatens to have Waris deported to Somalia. Seeing Waris at a loss, Neil suggests that she marry him to get a work permit, but nobody pays attention to his idea. Pushpa offers to help and uses her contacts to get Waris a legitimate passport. Finally, the agency sends all the models to the airport to fly to Paris. However, at the last minute, Waris is arrested by airport security. While detained, she recalls a moment when her grandmother told her about her aunt, the wife of the Somali ambassador in London, who was looking for a maid. Somehow, Waris's grandmother managed to get her a passport and sent her to London to work as a maid. Before saying goodbye, she advised Waris never to forget her roots and not to become a British citizen. Upon arriving in London, Waris had trouble adapting to modern life and began working as a cleaner for her aunt. Despite the difficulties, she managed to work there for years. One day, she found out from the news about the war in Somalia, and as a result, her employers had to leave for their country immediately. In the present, Waris is released after Pushpa posts her bail. The officer informs her that due to the closure of her embassy, she is automatically granted political asylum. However, since Waris did not renew her passport, she is only granted a limited permit to remain in the UK. Feeling down, she returns to the agency, where Lucinda repeatedly reminds her that she has invested a lot of money in Waris and will make her pay it all back. Desperate to work and pay Lucinda back, Waris decides to marry Neil to automatically acquire a work permit. Right after marrying, Waris returns to work at the agency. Lucinda assigns her a nude photo shoot with Terry. Seeing Waris's nervousness, Terry asks everyone to leave the room to make her feel comfortable. Once Waris feels comfortable in her own skin, she poses for the shoot, achieving incredible results. During the photo shoot, she imagines kissing Harold and being intimate with him. Music. After successfully completing the shoot, she wonders if she really wants to see Harold or not. Soon one night, immigration officers raid her home to see if she and Neil are really a married couple. Neil takes the opportunity to kiss her, which disgusts Waris. Upset, she meets Marilyn and tells her she would rather return to her family than live with Neil. Marilyn encourages her to spend one more year with him, to get the work permit and then divorce him. Having no other choice, Waris continues living with him, avoiding his advances, and soon she obtains her work permit. Before leaving, she returns the wedding ring to Neil. Waris then flies to Paris and joins the fashion shows as a model, along with her colleagues. Little by little, Waris becomes increasingly famous, appearing in top-tier fashion shows and making her mark in the modeling industry. Meanwhile, Marilyn is proud to see her on the magazine cover and boasts about it to others. As Waris's career flourishes, she starts earning a fortune. One day, she decides to visit Harold, using the note he sent her long ago. She goes to meet him but is heartbroken to see him with another woman. Soon the BBC makes a film about Waris's inspiring life journey, after which she is interviewed by a reporter. When the reporter asks about the day that changed her life, Waris recounts how she was circumcised. She begins by saying that when she was 3 years old, the day before being cut, she was given an extra portion of food, and the next morning her mother took her to the desert woman who removed her clitoris and cut off the inner and outer lips of her genital area. Because her mother had 12 children, she did not tend to the wound, which subsequently became infected. After sharing her story, Waris walks away, leaving the reporter in tears. Elsewhere, Harold continues searching for Waris and unexpectedly sees her on a magazine cover. Meanwhile, Waris decides to speak out against female genital mutilation at the United Nations. Marilyn and Harold arrive at her speech to support her. In her speech, Waris condemns genital mutilation, explaining that women suffer mental and physical illness for the rest of their lives after being mutilated. She calls for the abolition of this practice and encourages the world to be a better place for girls. The film ends with an epilogue stating that 130 million girls worldwide suffer the consequences of circumcision and that Waris Dirie was the first woman to draw global public attention to the practice of female genital mutilation. In 1977, she was named by the UN as an ambassador in the fight against this terrible ritual.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.